Most buyers don't make bad decisions because they lack information. They make bad decisions because they convince themselves into something that doesn't actually fit. And the process is subtle. It doesn't feel like a mistake while it's happening. It feels like progress and clarity. And it feels like this makes sense now. But what's really happening is something else. They're closing the gap between what they want and what's actually available. And instead of adjusting the search, they adjust the story they've been telling themselves about the property. That's how people talk themselves into the wrong decision. Not by ignoring red flags, but by reframing them until they feel acceptable. And today, we're going to break down how that actually happens. Because once you see it, you don't unsee it. We see a lot of buyers that create a story to justify buying a property instead of evaluating whether the property actually fits. It sounds like we'll get used to it. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. We can always adjust later. The location makes up for it. And none of these statements are irrational. They're logical, but they're not neutral. They're directional. They're moving the buyer towards a decision, not towards clarity, because the buyer has already started to want that specific property. And now the brain is solving for, how do I make this work? Instead of, does this actually work for me and for my lifestyle? This becomes dangerous because the things being adjusted are not surface level. They're things like daily layout, commute, friction, environmental discomfort, long-term usability. And those are not things that adapt quickly, or you can adapt quickly to them. Those are things you feel every day after you move in. The moment you hear yourself saying, oh, we'll get used to it, that's not resolution. That is a signal.
We see this a lot during showings. Buyers walk into a place and something feels slightly off. Not enough to walk away, but enough to notice. And instead of staying with that feeling, they start explaining it. They'll say things like, it's fine. It's not a deal breaker. We'll make it work. And you can actually see the shift happening. They go from observing to justifying. They move forward. They get under contract. And then later, sometimes weeks, sometimes months, that same thing comes back, not as a question, as a friction.
This happens when a buyer speeds up the decision process. Not because the buyer isn't ready, but because the buyer feels pressure to resolve uncertainty. That pressure can come from time. For example, lease ending soon, relocation timeline, competition, fear of losing the property, fatigue. They've seen so many homes. So buyers stop evaluating and start concluding. They say, this is the one. We're done looking. Let's just move forward. But the decision wasn't built. It was accelerated. And this creates mistake because good decisions require space. And buyers need space to compare, reflect, and notice patterns. When that space disappears, buyers rely on emotion, relief, and urgency. And those are not stable decision drivers. The moment a decision feels rushed, you're no longer choosing.
We see this a lot at the beginning. Buyers are curious. They are asking questions and comparing options. Then at some point, it changes. They start saying, this is good enough. We don't want to lose it. And the energy is different. It's not excitement, it's relief. And relief is not a decision signal, it's a pressure release.
And this is exactly when future selves disconnect kicks in. Buyers evaluate properties as their current self, but they live in them as their future self. And this gap will get wider and bigger once you live there. During a showing, you're visiting, you're observing, you're imagining. After closing, you're living, you're repeating, you're experiencing. And those are different mindsets. Buyers often underestimate how small things compound. Buyers often underestimate how small things compound. Things like layout, inefficiencies. Buyers often underestimate how small things compound. Things like layout, inefficiencies, noise patterns, access, light exposure. These don't feel big during a showing because you're there for 20 minutes. But after you move in, they repeat daily. And repetition turns small friction into constant awareness. Most buyers don't end up in the wrong home because they miss something obvious. It's usually because the process was moving towards a transaction, not towards the right decision.
So they end up in a home that never fully fit.
They start adjusting the story to make it work.
They speed up the decision.
And they evaluate it as who they are today,
not who they'll be when living there every day.
When a decision is right, it doesn't need to be defended. It holds, even after the excitement wears off. When it's wrong, you feel the need to keep justifying it. And over time, that turns into friction. The goal isn't to find something that works on paper. It's to make a decision that still feels right once you're no longer trying to convince yourself. If you're in that phase where you're trying to decide
and you are not sure if you're seeing things clearly, reach out.
We'll help you slow down
and make sure the decision actually fits how you live.
Because Florida living isn't measured in distance. It's measured in daily friction. We'll see you next week.